There is a debate. What is the primary political value, liberty or equality? The question of which is the primary value is the question of which gets sacrificed for the other when they come into conflict. If we give people liberty, this tends to result in inequality, as different freely chosen actions produce different consequences. We can create equality, but only by denying liberty, by prohibiting people from doing the things that result in inequality. So, should we reduce liberty so as to produce more inequality, or do we allow liberty even though it produces inequality? One reasonable answer is that both have value. What we need to do is to weigh one against the other. We sacrifice a little bit of liberty for a little bit of equality, but not too much. This leads to the question, what is the correct balance? I'm going to argue that liberty is the primary value. The perceived value of equality is a distorted perception of a fact that supports the principle of liberty. That fact is that no person has a natural right to rule, and no person has a natural duty to obey another person. In this, all people are equal. I'm going to take this discussion down to the foundation of value. I'm saying that people have reasons to support a principle of liberty, but not a principle of equality. But what is this thing called a reason, and how does one have a reason? Reasons to perform some action or not to perform some action, to support a principle or to reject a principle, are said to have two possible sources. We have desire-based reasons. My aversion to my own pain gives me a reason not to put my hand on a hot stove. My thirst gives me a reason to go to the kitchen for something to drink. My discomfort on a hot summer's day gives me a reason to turn on the air conditioner. Desire-based reasons can be complex, and some of them can be learned. A parent's concern for the health of their child gives the parent a reason to ensure that their child is properly vaccinated. A person's concern to stop the suffering caused by cancer can provide one with a reason to devote one's career to cancer research, and give another person a reason to donate to the first person's cancer research. Desires are natural phenomena. The aversion to pain is a feature of a biological system that sends signals to the brain that activate systems that command those parts of the brain that select action plans to make the pain stop. Hunger feeds an instruction to get something to eat. Concern for one's children gives the instruction to keep the child safe. Wanting to play the piano gives the instruction to save a block of time for piano practice. There's nothing mysterious or unnatural about desire-based reasons, and these desires also give us reasons to support or oppose certain policies. As I said, my aversion to my own pain gives me a reason not to put my hand on a hot stove. It also gives me a reason to give everybody else a reason not to put my hand on a hot stove, perhaps by making it illegal and threatening punishment. Your aversion to your own pain gives you a reason to support this policy as well. In fact, just about everybody has a reason to support this policy. This very same aversion to our own pain also gives us a reason to fund medical research into pain management, into safe pain management. From here, I'm going to follow a track close to that followed by the philosopher John Locke and written into America's Declaration of Independence. My desires give me a reason to support a certain type of government and to oppose others. They give me a reason to support a government that functions to secure certain goods. Locke would call these rights, but I note only that they are goods useful in achieving what one values. One of these goods is life. Research, I think, would show that losing one's life tends to make it more difficult to obtain the things that one values. Not always, but almost always. Relevant to this discussion, something else that's useful in realizing what we value is liberty. Slaves tend to have limited options when it comes to realizing what they value. Before we go any further, let's turn to the other source of reasons, the source that's independent of all desires. And I'm going to jump right in and announce that there's a problem with desire-independent reasons. Desire-independent reasons don't exist. There's no such thing as a desire-independent reason. If somebody says that there are these desire-independent reasons to support this policy or oppose that policy, then what they're saying is false. And this means that we only need to look at desire-dependent reasons to support a principle of liberty or equality. The only type of reasons that do exist. Recall, I'm investigating whether liberty or equality is the primary political value. I interpreted this to mean that I'm asking whether people have reasons to support a principle of liberty or a principle of equality, or both. I'm asserting that desire-dependent reasons are the only reasons that exist, so they can be the only types of reasons that can support a principle of liberty or a principle of equality. So now I'm going to argue that desire-dependent reasons support a principle of liberty. The primary argument for liberty comes to us from John Stuart Mill, as presented in his book called, conveniently enough, On Liberty. Like Mill, I forgo any advantage which could be derived to my argument from the idea of abstract right. These abstract rights are states that, apparently, contain an intrinsic prescriptive property commanding us all to respect them, and since no intrinsic prescriptive property exists, nothing can have that property. Unlike Mill, I also have to forgo any advantage which could be derived to my argument from the idea of utility. Mill's principle of utility asserts that certain consequences have an intrinsic prescriptive property, commanding us to maximize that which is intrinsically good and minimize that which is intrinsically bad. Since intrinsic prescriptivity does not exist, no consequence can have that property. Fortunately, Mill's argument as to why liberty would maximize intrinsically good consequences and minimize intrinsically bad consequences are also arguments as to why each of us has desire-dependent reasons to support a principle of liberty. And that argument goes as follows. In order for you to obtain the most of what you value, your actions need to be placed under the authority of the best informed and least corruptible agent when it comes to deciding what would successfully realize what you value. And the best informed, least corruptible agent is you. Now, there are people for which this is not true. Young children and people with cognitive impairments, for example. For these people, the best informed and least corruptible agent is somebody else, a family member, or the people working in a facility for caring for those who cannot care for themselves. But it is true of competent adults. You have years of experience. It's a subject that you have studied every day of your life. You've seen projects fail and projects succeed. You are intimately aware of what it is that you want to accomplish and what you find worthless. Nobody else even comes close to your knowledge on this subject. But you are also the least corruptible agent. If somebody else is put in charge of your life, they're going to use that power to realize what they value. Hopefully, they value what's in your best interest, but why not give authority for your life to somebody where this hope is nearly certain? Give that authority to you. One of the problems with giving somebody else authority over your life is that humans have this amazing power to deceive themselves into thinking that they are serving the interests of others when they're sacrificing others for their own benefit. Slave owners before the Civil War were masters of self-deception, deluding themselves into thinking that the practice of slavery was in the best interest of the slave. So now what about equality? What's its value? Just as with liberty, we will need to find desire-dependent reasons to support the value of equality. But really, the only desire that equality serves is the desire for equality. It isn't essential for the realization of any other value. If equality has value, then a state of perfect equality will be better, at least in this dimension, than any alternative. We can obtain perfect equality, which means that we can obtain the greatest possible value in this dimension, if we kill everybody. Once everybody is dead, everybody is equal. And if equality is good, then everybody being dead is good. This may be taken as a flippant, straw-man interpretation of the equality claim, but it really is not. If there are few desire-dependent reasons to support equality, then its value must be independent of desire, or intrinsic. Perfect equality will realize the greatest amount of this intrinsic value, and everybody being dead, like it or not, value it or not, is a state of perfect equality. Fortunately, intrinsic prescriptivity doesn't exist, so there's no reason to be driven towards a state of perfect equality. If this idea that equality has value is a mistake, then where does this mistake come from? I would argue that it comes in part from the fact, and it is a fact, that nobody has a natural right to rule or a natural duty to obey. In this, all people are equal. Up until the middle of the 1600s, the standard view around the world was that almost everybody had an obligation to serve a monarch or other ruling body, which had a God-given right to command obedience. Literally, God-given. They either were God, or so they said, or they were hand-picked by God for that position, the divine right of kings. In the 1600s, John Locke presented his argument against this idea that some people had a natural right to rule and others a natural duty to obey, which means that people had no obligation to serve masters. This fact, in turn, supported the principle of liberty above. There is no divine right that makes anybody subject and some other person ruler. So what about racial or gender equality? Are they to be thrown out as irrelevant? These equalities can be defended on the principles mentioned above. Nobody has a natural right to rule or duty to obey. If people are limiting freedoms based on race or gender, then they are asserting that the lives of those whose liberty is being restricted are theirs to command. It's perfectly appropriate and meaningful to ask, who are you to dictate how I can live my life? It's a question they can't answer, because there is no intrinsic to-be-doneness in obeying their commands. The second principle that sometimes gets confused with the principle of equality is that people have reasons to secure basic goods other than liberty. Life and liberty are not the only goods that people need if they are to realize what they value. Therefore, life and liberty are not the only goods they have reasons to secure. Other goods include food, clean water, health, and education. Like life and liberty take away a person's food, their clean water, their health, or their understanding of the world, and they're going to have a difficult time realizing what they value. It makes no sense to institute a government to secure liberty while one suffers from starvation, dehydration, disease, and ignorance. Securing these goods generally involves taxing those having no difficulty obtaining these goods and securing these goods for those who do not have them, which tends to be a move towards equality. But equality is not the goal. Securing these basic goods is the goal. That is what people have desire-dependent reasons to do. So the basic argument is this. Only desire-based reasons exist. There are desire-based reasons to promote liberty. Basically, this is because liberty helps people obtain what they value. With some exceptions, people have desire-dependent reasons to be in charge of their own lives. In contrast, there are few desire-based reasons to support equality, other than the desire for equality itself. There are reasons to reject the idea that some people have a natural right to rule and others a natural duty to obey, but that's a limited form of equality. So I conclude, considering liberty and equality, liberty is a primary political value. It's not the only primary political value. In addition to life and liberty, there's food, clean water, health, and education, but equality isn't on the list. What are the implications of this thesis? It argues that if the reasons that somebody says we should reduce liberty is to produce more equality, they've not provided a good reason. If they're saying that it's because each person should be in charge of their own lives, that's a good reason. If they're saying that it's because no person has a natural right to rule or duty to obey, that's a good reason. If they're saying that it's to secure food, clean water, health, and education, that's a good reason. Equality, for its own sake, is not. I'll confess, now that I reach the end, that I'm offering this argument as an illustration of the theory of value and of reasons that I used as the foundation for this argument. The merit of that theory rests in part on what we can do with it. This video illustrates something about what we can do with it. If you want to know more about the foundation, take a look around.